Guys, thank you so much for being here today. I know there was a lot of great talks, and thank you guys for choosing on being this one. I'm going to be talking about a topic that I'm becoming more and more passionate about because I really think it is dictating how we are going from an UI perspective. And my goal with this talk is to provide some insights that maybe not everyone was aware of, some things that could be done, some approaches, UI generation with the industry, my goal. And I think if you guys spark curiosity and interest, I think my job is done. So, I'm Leo Farias. I'm founder of a 40-person development agency here in the US called Concepta. I'm an open source contributor, Flutter and RGDE, and I've always been very passionate about UI, UX, and technology in general, and it's really interesting to see how everything is coming together into great developer experiences, great experiences in general. That's one of the reasons I believe so much in Flutter. All right, so warning. So this is done for two purposes. One is because I know that you guys get interested when you see warnings on the screen. But we're going to be doing live generation with AI, so we don't always control the outputs, but also connection is limited. I know some people had issues with connection, but I thought it was mostly interesting so you guys can start paying attention to the talk. All right, so sorry to disappoint you guys if you came here to maybe watch code be generated. Maybe that was not the right talk. So the difference, I think there's a difference between generative AI, UI, and AI-assisted code generation. And both are making great progress. I'm sure we all using code generation. Different cases, different levels of success, but I think it's improving. But that's not what generative UI is. So what is generative UI? So one way to think about it is LLMs are great at generating content based on context, right? So it is either to get a lot of linguistic context and be able to, output something they want from images to text and so on. And then you have GUIs, which they're great at providing structure, interactive interfaces for user inputs and navigation, right? So the best way to think about it is generative UI is a perfect marriage between LLMs and GUIs. And this opens up for a lot of different possibilities. And I have no downsides with chat interfaces. I think it works well. To be honest, I don't really care about spelling anymore. I don't know if you guys, has anyone got worse at spelling since LLMs became a thing? No, just me? Sometimes I just put keys together and it just, surprise me. So that's one of the benefits that we're seeing with LLMs is because it's able to make so many assumptions in context, maybe too many assumptions, some might say, for this result. So one way I'll describe generative UI, it creates dynamic, context-aware UIs by interpreting actions and maintaining state with LLMs. And this creates a more fluid, interactive responses. So essentially is, I want to interact with LLM, but whatever you're going to output for me, maybe it's going to display in a certain way based on what I'm asking, but also maybe I can interact with your response in a different way. All right, so what are some of the benefits of UI over chat? So first of all, a lot of us probably don't like chatting too much. Maybe just me. It's more intuitive, user-friendly, especially for complex tasks. Tasks where you need to, as humans, understand the output, and also you want to be able to re-engage within that specific context. It becomes really important. It has a much faster feedback loop between users and LLMs. So one thing that we're seeing, like if you guys use Gemini, ChatGPT, and so on, is that once you start having that conversation, it becomes very difficult for you to keep the context of specific pieces that you think are good and you like to reference back to it. Now, of course, that's not meant to solve, but I see generative UI as a way to be able to better improve that and solve that a little bit better. And also enhances the efficiency in interaction. So good news, I know that when people talk about AI, everyone is doom and gloom. But I think there's some positive news when it comes, especially for people that are involved with Flutter. In many ways, AI is becoming a user interface. So having access to a technology that allows to expose this in all screens possible, it's, I think, a critical piece for the future, as we're going to see. So congratulations, you guys made the right choice with Flutter. Okay, so how can LLMs understand your UI? There's been a couple talks already about AI, so I'm not going to go in depth so much on the schema piece. I think Chris gave a talk yesterday and Scott also. Were you guys able to catch those talks? Okay, no. There's Oh My AI, something like that. And I forgot the name now. But so essentially is, one thing that LLMs are doing now is when you interact, you ask for a prompt. You can say that you don't want to just blur out some text. There's a specific schema that you would like to be returned. And this is interesting because it allows you to create almost these dynamic APIs, right? So here's a sample. And I think this is one of the examples that Chris had in his talk, which is list of recipes. So essentially it's defined as a schema. Hey, I'm going to have a list of recipes. It's going to be an array of objects, and here are the properties of each object, and so on. And the main benefit is that once I go into the model itself, and I define that I want to return as a JSON with that schema, once I provide that prompt, it's going to return a valid JSON. And that's huge. That's huge for a lot of the things that we would like to do. So this is how you're going to be structuring outputs for Gemini. And so I'm going to do a quick demo, and this is where the warning applies. So I decided to choose a color palette generator. So I want to give a word, and that's one thing, like it just takes too much context. I don't really care about the word. The LLM is just going to, whatever that represents into a color palette is going to output. So I decided it's going to have the name. I would like a name for the color palette that it's going to pick, a font family that goes with the color palette, a color for the name, and I want 4 colors that I'm going to be using them together. Okay? So I'll be sharing this talk later, but this is pretty much the schema I created. As you can see, very similar. I'm saying that the values are not nullable. Say, hey, you need to return something. Don't return null. And also, all fields are required. I want everything, right? I want to be lazy on my validation. All right. So just for shortcuts, so I don't have to type it in, I'm going to click some of the examples on the bottom. It's going to type it in. It's going to send to the AI. Essentially, it's like I'm typing. So in examples here, I'm going to do tropical. And that's the schema. And I gave a name, Island Oasis. You can see here's just a valid hex code with the name and a font as selected. Another example, vibrance. And interesting thing, when I was with my daughter showing this, I was thinking of color palettes or things that are like tropical. Or she said, why don't you do chocolatey pink unicorn? So you guys are about to find out. That's what it is, guys. So as you can see, it's interesting because it's a very simple API for color generation. I mean, it doesn't really get much easier than this. I think our kids will be very spoiled. Now, what if I want to get the schema and I want to render UI with the response within the chat, right? I can do the same thing. Here I'm going to do Cyberpunk, for example. And you can see that now I'm showing the UI, but also, hey, actually, I have the colors that are there, just the schemas. I can actually switch between them now, because maybe I'm selecting between different ones that I want. And with this, I can kind of go and pick each one. I can check out what the schema looks like. So here, a very simple example of some of the uses that we can see in applying the schema within the user interface. But LLMs, they evolved a lot more into just generating content. Right now, they do a great job orchestrating APIs. And this opens up for where we're going to go into the future, because it allows you leverage tools within LLMs. So Gemini has something called function calling, which is currently in beta. And essentially what I do is that next time I do a prompt, if I have a tool defined within Gemini, let's say I have 3 functions, what Gemini is going to do is say, can I use any of these tools to answer the question? Do I have to use any of these tools? Or would the answer be better if I use any of these tools? And what Gemini is going to do is going to select one of those tools, think of it as just a function. And once it's selected, it has the signature of the function, the arguments they're expecting it. It's going to generate those arguments and call the function with those arguments. Once that function gets called, it's going to get a response, and the response gets back into Gemini, and I can choose to do anything I want with it. And this is interesting because you have the orchestration of the API, but also you have the creation of the schema itself. So for example, the same way we have a schema coming in, I could have let's say I have some content, just plain text content. They would like to turn into a schema to call an API. I can just give it to Gemini. Gemini is going to turn that into the arguments to call the function. So it's both ways. It's receiving it and also sending it. All right. So here's an example of a function. So I created a very robust light control system. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go first, dim the lights. And we're going to go through here the output real quick. So I just dimmed the lights, and it says, OK, interesting thing, I have 2 tools. One is get brightness, and the other one is update brightness. Now I said, dim the lights by 20. And this is interesting because it doesn't know what the lights are at right now. So it understood that in order to dim the lights by 20, I need to know where is that right now. So it goes ahead and gets the brightness, first function. And then it knows, OK, I get the brightness, now I have to update it. And it goes ahead and dims the light by 20 of that, right? And outputs now 20. And then I can go ahead and turn off the light. So turn off the light's brightness 0. It doesn't really matter where it's at. I'm just going to go ahead and trigger an update. I'm going to go ahead and set it to 80. Also doesn't need the context. You can just do that. And I'm going to do lower by half. Since I want to lower by half, it had to gain the context again. And this is an example of how is now orchestrating these tools and these, the APIs that you have based on context. It's not trying to make too many assumptions of what's going on. Say, hey, I have these tools, and in order for me to use them, depending on what the task you want me to do, I'll go ahead and call them and use them in many different ways. Now I can go and say, you know, I would say one thing that I wanted to try essentially is like, what is a good brightness level for reading on a sunset? And give me the output. That's what I want. I think LLMs are going to be pretty good at doing that soon. So, okay. So now, this is how normally we interact with LLMs, right? Through chats. Natural language. So pretty much I say, is the light on? I go ahead, Gemini says, get light status, function call, brightness. It loads that back into the text part, which is part of the text response, in order to say it's yes. So it's a cycle, but it's just a chat. But I would like to do something different. I mean, it is Flutter. So I would like to maybe return as a widget. Maybe I just want to see it. Maybe I want to interact with this widget. And this is where I start creating the concept of widget response. And that's something that Chris sells. There's a package that is in alpha called Flutter AI Toolkits. I was just talking to Chris yesterday about some of these use cases to bring it in and make it even easier to add them. But what is a widget response? A widget response, now there's a couple different ways I'm interacting with it. So I have, as a user, I call Gemini. Gemini is going to give me this function as response, but once it returns, I'm going to keep it in a shared state within a widget. So pretty much is going to call the function, is going to return what I request, but now as a user, I can now interact with it, and the interactions I make it is going to call the function again, right? Because whenever you're interacting with light, say, okay, lower the light to 10. Okay, lower another 20, lower another 5. Maybe you say, okay, no, let me just do it in front of it, right? So I think it's a good example of what the shared states might look like, and the user, the context is being shared throughout not only the LLM side, but also on the widget side. Okay, so here I'm going to set to max brightness. I guess it's already max, lower by actually. All right. Sorry, there's a shared states problem between my slides. All right, so here I still have the output of the function, and this is just for the presentation purpose. So I went ahead and lowered the light, and now I have a UI. It responded, it acted on it, but I can actually go and switch and interact with the lighting. Turn it on, turn it off, and I'm going to go ahead and say, I'll update the light level. I'm going to go now increase by 35. I'm going to add set to 80, and I can just go ahead and interact with it. And one thing that you'll see is that even though I have a delay on the widget, it's not really an API being called, it's just a local function and with its own states. One thing that you see is that the response, LLMs, they will stream the responses back to us. And when they stream the parts, the same way they stream in the text, they restream the function calls also. Meaning, you can start seeing similar to this where you have, okay, the output is a giant stream and saying, call this function, add this text, call this function, call this function. So it's almost like if I have a very long instruction, I'm getting all that stuff in real time. And by listening to the stream, we can start listening to the calls that we need to turn into functions. So in a way, we start streaming the UI. And we're able to update very easily. So essentially say, hey, here's a function call with the arguments. Maybe it's still proceeding with the rest of the responses. I can go ahead and get that, build the widget while the UI is loading. So I say, hey, you're going to call the function anyways. I'll just wait here with the loader while the function is being loaded. And once it's done, the UI will load. The user can interact. And I can go ahead and manage it in many different ways. And this shows a little bit of, I think, what is so interesting about where we're going, which is having that context in order to fill the gaps, but also now having a second level of interaction with it. Now, there's another piece to it. So for the example of the lights, I created a widget, and all you guys can do that now. So you create a widget that has a predefined schema, say brightness, and hey, once you give me brightness, I'm going to go ahead and show this within the widget. So essentially say, I'm going to get the response, and I'm going to put it within a widget. But what if one of the tools that we wanted to use, it's a widget, but it's not really defined what that widget looks like. It's a widget schema. So essentially what I'm saying, say, part of the tool is say, hey, there's a few different ways I can display this information. And I'm going to give you the options, and you're going to select how you like to display it, okay? And this is something that I'm exploring more and more, because I think that a lot of people go into about code generation, but I think there's more of this orchestration of experiences that we might be seeing, and the generation of these widget schemas, right? So maybe you're not designing the app exactly what it looks like. You're designing all the tools that app could look like, and AI is going to generate it for you, okay? Now, one thing I'll mention, this is experimental, so it doesn't, things might be wrong, I would just say that. But here's an example of, I'm just going to go through it, and actually let me share some code here. I think this might be a better example. Is that good? All right. So it's just I'm going to create a form. Seems fairly easy. I'm going to create a widget schema and say, hey, here's some things that this widget can have. So it can have text fields, it can have drop-downs, and it can have color pickers, right? Now, you can imagine this can be anything. It could be images, it could be different types of text, but essentially it's very basic. And I went ahead and defined the schema here. So let me just go through the drop-down real quick. Here's the drop-down. It will have a label. It will have a current value, and also going to have the options of that value. So this is interesting because, hey, you're not just going to tell me what it is. I want you to also tell me what it could be so I can build it. And color picker, same thing. It's going to have a label, and it's going to have a color. Okay? And here you can see the schema that is defined. Now, a list can be as whatever length you want. And it can be nullable. I don't want you to, if you don't have a color, don't use a color. If you don't need a drop-down, don't use a drop-down. But essentially is say, hey, here's some options. I'm going to output something and create the schema for me so I can render it. All right, this is alpha, guys. So I'm going to go ahead and, for the color palette, let's say I have the color palette, but I only want to change the top colors. All right, so here's the current schema that existed, and this is all I provided. I provided, hey, you're going to generate a schema, and I'm going to say get the colors, and I'm providing this output. That's what I'm providing the LLMs. It has no understanding of what we just talked about with the color palette. It doesn't know any of that. All it knows like, hey, I have a schema. Here's an input. Turn this into what it is. And by doing that, it selected the label, so we can see that's not in the information I provided. So the name of the field is top left color, so it converted this into a nice label. And also returned a color picker. So now I have this color, and I can use it as a color picker. So essentially is just providing and sending widget schemas for me. So I'm going to go ahead and change fonts. All right, so change fonts. Based on the schema, I had to provide its enum values. So it returned the font that is selected, but also gave me all the options that I can pick and change from it. And this where it's becoming very powerful with the schema, because the response that I provided doesn't have the options. The schema has the options. And with that, I'm able to render the UI. So let's say I want to change all the colors. So now I provided all the colors based on the prompt. And let's say I want to change everything. All right, I added the field there. So as you can see here, it becomes a really powerful way for people to interact with the UI. So let's say I have I'm sure you guys love building forms. But imagine you have a very large form or a wizard of a very long experience. And in order for you to edit that, you have to kind of go into page 3, section 5. We are in a situation now where you can say, hey, I just want to edit this information. I really don't care where it's at. I don't care. Don't make me go through everything. This is the update in real time. Create a edit form that I can go ahead and change it. And this is one of the ways that does that. And again, you guys saw that it is a very simple schema. I'll go ahead and share the widgets. This is not made for production, just made for demo. So, but essentially is like, I'm just getting the response. I return this DTO, this data class, and I'm just looping through the field and in order to build it. So this schema or dynamic widget is actually very simple. We're currently working on ways to also keep a shared state, and only that, where the LLM can actually tell us the endpoints that it needs to choose. So for example, if I need to update a color, it's going to return me the schema, but also the functions that I can call in order to update the schema. So it's returning a screen with the API calls that I need in order to update it also. And I think all this is because of the power of LLMs and a way to make assumptions. And I think this is very exciting throughout. We're going to see more and more things as you're building like states and text fields and so on. That's, I think, where things are going to have to mature a lot. in order to manage those things. But I think this is just a good example of how we could be building and generating the UI. I think there's a little bit of, I think, the future of my future of UI. My goal is that before I guess everyone was just like graphic designers, and they became web designers, but everything was very static. And then we start having these more dynamic experiences of APIs and calling APIs, and maybe the information is different that it needs to apply to me. I should be able to see it. And that's why technologies like Flutter became critical, because things are so dynamic, so flexible. And we're still building these dynamic experiences. But I think we're going to a place now where there's more of an orchestration of these different experiences that might happen, instead of actually shaping them. If you imagine the UI becomes more like a conversation like we see with LLM, it means that there's too many paths that people can go to, that they can pick, that they can select. In a way, people will make their own UI experience, right? Next time I load the app, maybe I don't want to be confronted with this place. Maybe I want to say, hey, when you load the app, this is what I want to see. And when I tap here, this is where I want to go. So essentially, we architected all these possible story branches that people can pick, and then the LLM is going to be orchestrating in between them. In a way, UI becomes more critical than ever. And I think this is a very exciting place for us to be in, because it's a little bit of uncharted territory, and I think it shows how critical UI and UX will still be. And Flutter is a perfect fit for this, because it's meant to be on every device. So we're going to be interacting with everything in all different screens, in all different places, and I think Flutter is a great fit for this. Guys, thank you. Again, my name is Leo Farias. I will be releasing the slides hopefully soon, maybe by the end of the day. You guys can check out Twitter, GitHub, or X for that. And yeah, there you have all sample codes, everything that is used in the presentation with Gemini. And I think with the Flutter AI toolkits, there's making it easier to implement some of those things. I think that's something that is going to be exciting. It's currently in alpha, so you guys should also check it out. I think it'll be a good package for that. But yeah, I think I have a few minutes left, so I'll open up for questions if any. But if not, I'll let you guys leave early. Thank you.